President Donald Trump has disclosed that U.S. forces had captured the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro after launching a large-scale strike on a South American country. Now, Trump's stunning announcement follows months of steadily mounting U.S. military and economic pressure on leftist leader Maduro and his country's oil export-dependent economy. Now, Trump's claim of Maduro's capture comes 2 days after Maduro attempted to engage with Trump, offering cooperation on fighting drug trafficking and illegal migration. Now, Trump has given differing arguments for his campaign against Venezuela, including the claim that the South American country is a major drug exporter to the United States and that Venezuela seized U.S. oil interests. The Republican leader has not explicitly called for Maduro's ouster, but the U.S. government, along with many European nations, does not recognize the Venezuelan leader. Meanwhile, the European Union has called for calm and respect for international law as tensions rise over reported United States military action in Venezuela. The EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, said the bloc is closely monitoring developments after the Venezuelan government accused the U.S. of attacking installations in several parts of the country. In a statement shared on social media, Kallas said she had spoken with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, as well as the European Union's ambassador in Caracas. While repeating the EU's long-held position that President Nicolas Maduro lacks democratic legitimacy, she stressed that any action must follow international law. Kallas added the principles of the United Nations Charter must be respected at all times and urged all sides to discuss this development. We are joined by global affairs analyst Alexander von Rugen. Alexander, thank you so much for joining us at this point. If opposition claims are true that Maduro quietly negotiated guarantees with Washington, tell me, what does this reveal about the gap between, public confrontation and private diplomacy in global politics?
Well, I think you just described global politics. There's always a closed-door meeting in most cases, especially in a case like this where it's got so many moving parts, and Maduro was resisting. You've got Trump attacking Maduro, and this has been going on for many years. In fact, Maduro's predecessor, Chavez, was also sanctioned. Maduro was never duly elected. He got the seat as president when Chavez passed away. But I think what you have to look is the turn of events leading up until this point. There's of course outrage right now. How can America come in and rendition a sitting leader of a country? He's supposed to have diplomatic immunity. The train of events that have led up to this have been part of Trump's chess game. He's been labeled a narco-terrorist. He was indicted in 2020 as a narco-terrorist for aiding and abetting in the transfer of drugs to America, killing Americans with fentanyl. Now, that's been outstanding for, 6 years now. The blockade around the country has escalated, and we knew something was coming. Prior to the indictment, they had elections in Venezuela in 2024, where Europe agreed Maduro didn't win it fairly. They didn't recognize him as the duly elected president of Venezuela. That went to Eduardo Gonzalez, but nothing happened. All the other opposition people were arrested in Venezuela. We see this happening around the world now, even in Africa. Mm-hmm. Then Machado, the leader of the opposition, she wins the Nobel Prize in late August. She accepts a prize for President Trump. Now, tell me there wasn't something going on behind closed doors between those two. I don't mean romantically either. This deal, this chess game, has been set in motion for a while. Then we had the embargo. Now, prior to the embargo, when Chavez took over back in the 90s, they nationalized all the American oil assets that they had built in the Maracaibo fields. Chevron, Exxon, multiple other companies lost all their investments. And it was subsequently doled out to the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, the Vietnamese. There's a host of countries operating in Venezuela. The irony is, as well, oil production fell from a high of almost over 4 million barrels a day. They're barely squeaking by with 700,000 barrels a day now, thanks to partially U.S. sanctions and the fact that their fields, they've lost all their brain power. Their good mechanics and engineers have fled to neighboring Colombia or Mexico to work in their oil patches because of the conditions in Venezuela with PDVSA. So we've got a perfect storm here. Now, did Trump do things illegally? Well, he's bending the rules. The seizure of foreign ships, well, he's saying they had sanctioned oil on them, which justified their seizure. He couldn't technically seize them, but he used the foreign flag loophole in international maritime law. They were changing flags, which de facto they didn't have a flag they were flying under, and therefore were a rogue ship, and it gave him a plausible excuse to seize them. I think it was more a case of, I'm not going to ask permission, but if I'm wrong, I'll beg for forgiveness.
Wow, that's quite...
The landslide of information is another key event happened. Caraval, who most people wouldn't know that name, was Maduro's security chief. He was arrested in Spain last year, rendition to America in August. He's already pled guilty. And from what I understand, he's given a plethora of information about the dealings on illicit drugs and other sanctioned activity from Venezuela, basically directing it towards Maduro and his wife. I'm sure he knew where all the bodies were buried. In addition, the sons of the cartel runners in El Chapo's sons have also pled guilty. And if there is a connection between the Sinaloa cartel and shipments going through Venezuela, it's possible more evidence came from that. So I think America is playing chess. They're building up the evidence. They've already got an indictment, but it was an absentia in 2020. Now they've got an embargo around the country. And most recently, they bombed a meth lab, a huge meth lab operation with precursor chemicals for fentanyl in the Maracaibo area on the docks. Huge operation.
Alexander, I'm wondering, and I think quite a number of people are also asking the same question. Yes, Donald Trump is pointing the fingers at Maduro and accusing him of drug trafficking, but is it really about drug trafficking or is it about the oil now?
Both. Drug trafficking. He's a narco-terrorist. Now, again, I was leading to that. He put a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head. So when you create this perfect storm, and there's already dissension within the country, but it's a quiet dissension because they're all afraid of the bully leader. Any opposition, you get thrown in jail, or you get beat up by the police and thrown in jail. They've been quietly providing information. There's a heck of an incentive here with $50 million. I wouldn't be surprised if Maduro's own generals rolled over on him and helped the CIA and Black Ops coordinate the extraction. Okay? A perfect extraction needs boots on the ground and intelligence on the ground. They just don't come in guns a-blazing. Okay? It needs to be a surgical removal. And that's what they've done. And they've done this before. They did it in Panama in 1990 with General Noriega, who, by the way, was also a narco-terrorist. Served 20 years in U.S. prison. They did it with Saddam Hussein, although we all know what happened in Iraq with the so-called weapons of mass destruction being the catalyst to a war. And, well, they just weren't there. That was a false war, and but it's gone. He's dead. He was executed, tried and executed in his own country without any fanfare at all. If that's a perfect storm for a cover-up. We saw it happen in Libya with Gaddafi. Although it wasn't a war and it wasn't a U.S. extraction, it was a U.S.-sponsored uprising. Hillary Clinton was bold enough to say, in Gaddafi's case, we came, we saw, he died, with a smile on her face. I think that's very politically incorrect to do. But if we talk about ramifications for Africa, that's as close as it gets in the past. We have recent activities in Nigeria with the narrative being a Christian genocide. Nigerians don't like that because they're a secular country. If Christians are killed and Muslims are killed, why don't we just call it Nigerians being killed? That would be the proper narrative, but Trump is using the narrative to label Nigeria a country of specific interest because it's regarding religious strife. So he's very calculating. When one must always listen to his words and what he's saying, he's not acting out of irrational emotion. He's setting the playing field for what's coming next. And in the case of Nigeria reacted properly. They sent their delegation to Washington. They planned together. Attacks happened against insurrectionists. There's still a lot of protests going on. I think the president is gone to Europe because he didn't want to hear the music, but he's already made the plan. So if there's going to be any renditions in Nigeria, I would think, unlike it's not going to be against the president, it's going to be against any ringleaders that are supporting the insurgencies in Nigeria.
Mr. von Rugen, apologies, we'll have to take a pause on this conversation. We'll definitely return to continue right after this break. Thanks for staying with us. Of course, we're still having a conversation as regards the U.S. military invasion into Venezuela. And I still have our global affairs analyst, Mr. Alexander von Rugen, here with me. Thank you for staying with us, Mr. von Rugen. Now, is the U.S.-Venezuelan standoff a relic of what I would call a Cold War-style power politics? Or can we call it a template for how great powers now manage defiant states in a multipolar world?
Well, I think you have to look at the history of every country, the interrelationships. An embargo is not new. It's technically an act of war. Now, ironically, this has happened before in Venezuela. Most people don't know the history. It happened in 1902. The German Navy, the British Navy, and the Italian Navy surrounded Venezuela for foreign debts. Under the Monroe Doctrine, Teddy Roosevelt stepped up for Venezuela, and he told the foreign navies, this is an act of war. America is ours, meaning not just the USA, the Americas, the Western Hemisphere, and we're obliged to protect it. So he sent the U.S. Navy, and he acted as an intermediary arbitrator in that conflict, and it saved Venezuela. America went further on to invest heavily into their oil fields and into other industries in Venezuela. They were thriving partners. It was only due to the military juntas and dictatorships that have come in as of the 1970s. I think 75 was the first one, and then with Chavez in the 90s. That the friction has been between the two countries because of the nationalization of all American assets in Venezuela. You asked me a few minutes earlier if it's just the drugs or the oil. I think oil is a big factor, especially with Venezuela being the largest resource in the world, actually, as far as reserves go. And many of the U.S. refineries are already tweaked to heavy Venezuelan oil. They need that heavy grade of oil. to run their refineries. And now Trump's chess game started on this a year ago when he visited Saudi Arabia, and he cut a deal with the Saudis, the Emirates, and Qatar to keep the U.S. dollar intact as the petrol currency. The case in point, Saudi Arabia bought $143 billion worth of arms from America. Collectively, the Middle East agreed to invest $1.4 trillion into America on this partnership. Now, what does this tie with Venezuelan oil have to do with it? Well, the fact is, America is the number one oil producer in the world right now. Again, most people don't know that. It's 14 million barrels a day. Even Saudi Arabia's only 12 million, and Russia is 11 million. Venezuela, if they ramp up production to what it previously was, the oil's still there, it's just extracting it properly and having the right engineering, they'll be up to in between 4 and 5 million barrels a day, which would boost America, if that were a partnership, almost 19 million a day. That means America controls OPEC. That means America controls the world price of oil, which many economies depend on. That means America will keep its dollar as the petrocurrency for the globe, or they can dump oil into the market, and it's supply and demand. Many countries need that $60 a barrel, but if it went to $30 a barrel, they wouldn't be able to produce. Their production costs would be too high. Nigeria could conceivably suffer in that case as well. So you can see this is a giant chess game that's all intertwined. And then, of course, there's other resources in Venezuela. Venezuela is a big gold producer. Most economies are getting gold back now. And the other business development potential in Venezuela, it's a country of almost 40 million people. It was a thriving nation with a good standard of living, much like Libya was before Gaddafi fell. So under dictatorship, it's not like this happened yesterday. It's been a declining economy other than oil, and it's been sanctioned by America for many, many years. So America is capitalizing on what's been built up here. They're not doing something on a whim. This has escalated. The warnings have been given. Maduro was offered a free pass to leave. He chose not to. He thought he could play the United Nations international law card, which technically Trump may have broken, but if the means justifies the end, he's going to say, well, it was justified. That'll be America's argument, I think.
All right, Alexander, I'd like to know, what are the long-term implications of, energy politics, talking oil, gas, and even supply of security, especially on U.S. policy recalibration towards Venezuela, especially now that we are in a volatile global, energy market?
Well, I think I just described it. The fields in Maracaibo and area have been neglected. The Chinese have tried. They've invested over multiple billions of dollars there. The Russians were in there. America a few years ago had already repossessed Citgo, which was the gas distribution arm of PDVSA, the national oil and gas company in America, basically bankrupting them with judgments. Unfortunately, the Russians, Rosneft, was funding Citgo, and they were a creditor. Well, when the U.S. put them into bankruptcy, it wiped out Russia's claims there. So that certainly upset Putin and his oligarch friends. Americans have been strategizing this for many, many years. So as I indicated, by having Venezuelan reserves on their side, they can keep the throne as number one oil producer in the world and direct other economies that are dependent on petroleum production. In Africa, basically many countries in the Gulf of Guinea, Angola for sure, Nigeria for sure, Libya, and then the developing fields currently both in East and West Africa. Everybody seems to be going for oil right now, ironically, the more people that produce it, the more the price will fall. But if America acts as the catalyst to reason, then OPEC will be stable. They'll work in partnership with Saudi Arabia, and everyone should thrive.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Alexander von Rugen, for having this conversation with us.